Hello, my name is Jacob and this is my YouTube channel. I'm a student of religious studies on Charles University and I'm studying new religious movements. This is my third video, which is studying Marilyn Manson and his abuse of women and his fandom cult as a new religious movement. In the first video, which I've already uploaded, I study Marilyn Manson in Baudrillard's theory of hyperreality. In the second video, I study him in the theory of 10 signs of new religious movements. Today, I want to take the signs of a charismatic movement and apply them to Marilyn Manson. It's a pretty long video because, or I don't know if video, but it's 23 different points and signs of charismatic movements, which I will go through. And at the beginning, I just want to start with something. I was mentioned by Manson's abusive behavior on Instagram that I'm spreading conspiracy theories about Marilyn Manson, which I have to respond to and say that these are not conspiracy theories, these are just religious studies theories applied to Marilyn Manson. I hope you will help me to share this message. I'm just a regular guy who studies religion, right, and uses the theories to interpret Marilyn Manson's cult, because Marilyn Manson's cult is in its nature religious. The admins of the site, Manson's abusive behavior, they told me he's just a narcissistic, pathological guy, blah blah blah, and that's it. But that's not it, right? That's not what I see there. So let there be study in science and social science, and let's go for the signs of a charismatic movement. So at the beginning, I will start with some signs which are common to the new religious movement, which I've mentioned in the last video. So first, there is this guy, this religious leader, in this case Marilyn Manson, who comes with a religious invention, right? That's what I've talked about in the last time. And in the charismatic point of view, it's very important that this charismatic leader believes firmly in his mission and in the completion of this mission. And that's connected with the second point, with the protest, with the action of the people, of the fans of the cult of Marilyn Manson or other charismatic leaders. The sufferings and the sacrifice of the leader itself, which is shown to the believers, is encouraging sacrifice from the believers themselves, right? So Marilyn Manson was mutilating himself on video, on the podium, on shows. He was talking about it in lyrics, in interviews, and he was showing it to the public through photos. And young people have just mirrored this, right? They have try to be copy of Marilyn Manson in this way. So that's how he has driven them into this cult, partly. So the first step, I will open the steps here on my computer. So the third step in the new religious movements in general is millennialism. So I've already talked about millennialism in Manson's movement, in the Antichrist Superstar era. We have to understand one thing. Most movements, new religious movements, come through this era of millennialism when, like, they say, oh, it's the end of the world is coming, and then the end doesn't come, right? So how does the new religious movement get through this? In the case of Marilyn Manson, it's very clever. Marilyn Manson basically gave up on his Antichrist revolution and Antichrist apocalypse, and he started a new type of apocalypse in the next era, in mechanical animals, when he was talking about an alien invasion and so forth. So Marilyn Manson does a different type of apocalypse in each of his era, which is a clever way. It's even a clever religious way how to keep people involved in religious thinking and in the feeling that the end is near, right? So the next step was ethnocentrism. We've talked a lot about it. And in this case, I want to show it on two things. So first, ethnocentrism of the fans of Marilyn Manson is shown through the outside appearance, right? The clothing, the makeup, the gadgets, all the things that they have, right? The accessories. They are imitating or repeating some parts of Marilyn Manson. They hope to look like him, and they are repeating it. And that's the tribe of Marilyn Manson, right? That's an ethnographic term. In digital ethnography, it would be really a constant, which is not weird, right? And the next thing is that part of many ethnographic groups or ethnogroups in aboriginal places and stuff like this is some type of mutilation or adjusting of the body, mostly scarification, which again in this case of Marilyn Manson and his fans we can find, right? So let's go to the other, the charismatic aristocracy. So we've talked about the charismatic leader and how he is the highest, blah blah, but there's one thing I've talked about in the last video. Charisma is not a substance or a quality of an individual. It's a quality of a relationship between two individuals. So that means that to find out that somebody's charismatic is a process. So in this theory of new religious movements, academics, they claim that there is something called the charismatic aristocracy. Some people in the inner courtyard of that charismatic leader who have a material reason why they support the guru, the charismatic leader. That's the people around Marilyn Manson, right? The band and stuff and the producement, which were all involved in the abuse of the women. And this aristocracy, they are spreading the devotion to the charismatic leader onto other followers, right? Because they are just imitating the more devoted fans which they see. The next thing is enthusiasm. Enthusiasm. I don't know how you say it in English. It's about the energy that the movement always is spreading, you know, right? I don't know, if you imagine Hare Krishna people as a new religious movement, you know, they sing in the streets, they're happy, you know. Every religious movement has a capability to open energy in people so that they feel happiness, right? And they have a lot of energy which they can spread. So this is a way how the charismatic leader also gives the devotees, the fans, a feeling that there is something special, religious going on, right? And this feeling Marilyn Manson's spreading on concerts. That's the regular thing where fans can go and they can go through this feeling. And the whole time when they're listening only on the album, right, they're just preparing for this live action where they can feel it through the energy. And that's basically something that's supporting the charismatic relationship between the followers and Marilyn Manson, the charismatic leader. So the 7th point is about that most religious movements, they don't have any specific rules inside. That's like in Marilyn Manson's cult, that's obvious because there is no moral thing at all. You can do basically anything you want. The 8th sign is one class, the only class, right? That's connected to the fans of Marilyn Manson, the satanic revolution that he was supposed to bring upon America, to bring Satanists as the only living class, right? That's the fall That's basically the continuation of thoughts of Anton LaVey, who was imagining this scientific, satanic, eugenistic, futuristic civilization. The ninth sign is overcoming social boundaries. So that's something every new religious movement has to do, right? Overcome some social boundaries. Mostly it's connected to taboos. So Marilyn Manson is breaking taboos about suicide, about drugs, about homosexuality, about women looking like transgender things, even about abuse of women, right? That's the horrible part of it. We accepted it even. He was breaking many taboos even with families, you know, like telling children to murder their parents, you know. That's basically the embodiment of violent anarchy. The next sign is always, again, like most religious movements, they have to fight against the society and against the religious movements. And also they have to overcome social boundaries, and they have to overcome biological boundaries. And this is mostly something connected to the flesh, to the blood. It's something that can be connected to the scarification and adjustments of the body. But it's also about overcoming and breaking boundaries in this biological sexual meaning, like rape, pedophilia, incest, and all those necrophilia, all those kind of things, which Marilyn Manson deeply connects to his art, and not only to his art but also to his real actions. The next sign is creating the own boundary, right? Us and them, the group. That's connected to the groups of Marilyn Manson, and it's connected to another sign, which is creating a new boundary, a wall, division. We have to understand that new religious movements, through the history, they always have some energy, but over time this charisma goes down, right? And the charismatic leader has several tools how to trigger the charisma up, right? So what can he do? He can basically come and he and his movements, they have already become famous because of the 10 signs of the new religious movements, which I've mentioned before. So now they have to make new steps, right? So the first is creating a new wall. By creating a new wall, a new division from the outside world, or even in the group itself, like saying, oh, these people in our group are the enemy, we have to put them away. That's something that always happens. And that happened with Marilyn Manson, right? With the whole thing about the abuse and the allegations. 99% of Marilyn Manson groups, they banned posts which were admitting that he did some abuse. And this is a typical sign of a cult, right? So that was affecting the people too. So what can a guru, a charismatic leader do? What else can he do to trigger this energy back in his movement? So in most religious movements, he just gives a new revelation, right? So like the people, they are like, oh, I don't know. And then he gives, oh, I know something new. And he comes with another religious invention, right? He's repeating the first step. And that's triggering it. And in the case of Marilyn Manson, every album is a new trigger. Every album is a new revelation, right, for the fandom. So with every new album, his charisma is growing. Another step are gifts to people. It's something connected to the special relationships, which I've mentioned in the last video. It's just something the charismatic leader gives something that's not of a big value to him, and he gives it to someone who considers it to be a huge value. A small thing, right? Handshake, blessing, just a small thing, a brush, I don't know, anything, piece of clothing, even dirt, anything it can be. You can see that on the concert, right, when Marilyn Manson, even if he would spit in something, like in his t-shirt, and throw it somewhere, the fans would love it, right? That's, it's almost sacred. So that's another thing, right? I don't know how we call it, reliquies, just holy things from the old past, things that are connected to holy figures, to saints. That's what he's using on the concerts, right, to spread more charismatic power. The 15th or 16th step is creating a new task or asking for a sacrifice. So this tasks, that's something connected to something I've mentioned before. It's a special task, some sacrifice, which, for example, in the case of girls, women fans, is to be abused, and in the case of male fans, to do some dirty work for Marilyn Manson, threatening and attacking and stuff like this. It can be connected with the gifts, like I said before, sharing some special, secret, intimate information like photos, which the celebrity, charismatic leader is giving to the fans, and they are sharing it, right? And this is the process how the charismatic aristocracy is also functioning, right? That's the leaders of the groups which communicate with Marilyn Manson and which spread his images and photos and his messages. They are the charismatic aristocracy of the cult of Marilyn Manson. The 16th point is sexual fantasies connected to the leader. So in new religious movements there is some platonic, although sexual, connection to the celebrity or the charismatic leader. Something like, oh, he's so pretty, I would fuck with him or her. But not like in real, because he's too holy to do it. But he's just pretty, you know, the leader. And this feeling, that's something that's always this latent sexual fantasy is a part of every charismatic movement. And that's something you can find in Marilyn Manson's cult, right? He's called the God of Fuck, and you can see how fans are talking about him. It's connected to another point, in that most new religious movements who have a charismatic leader, almost all of them, they become a sex cult in one way or the other. There are a few exceptions, like cults where they castrated themselves and stuff like this. But most of the religious movements, even from the 60s, right, there's so much allegations. You can find the Mormons, right, they fall into polygamy. You can find the Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses abuses. You can find all of the gurus, Maharisha, Yogi, I don't know, whoever. Basically everyone, Sri Chinmoy, Sai Baba, Osho, Bhagwan Rajesh. All of those figures basically were sexual gurus who abused their charismatic leadership to have sex with their followers, and that's something that's pretty common. It's almost like a law that when there is a small religious cult with a charismatic leader, it ultimately always ends with women, and mostly even the men, having sex, submissive sex, with the religious leader. You can find it even in Christian churches, which became cults, like Jim Jones the famous like Jonestown suicide before, he was sexually like he was fucking basically male and female members of the congregations, and like I said, that's pretty common in most of the new religious movements. So Marilyn Manson's cult is not an exception in this case. Then there is something. So most religious leaders, when their charismatic power is falling down because some people were hurt or disillusioned, and they go away and start spreading things about the cult figure, about him not being honest and stuff like this. Always the charismatic leader, what can he do in the last moment? There is a strategy, and it mostly goes through, and that's the position where the prophet, the guru, the charismatic leader, in this case Marilyn Manson, becomes the martyr, right? The discriminated, the martyr for the faith, the one who has to suffer. In this case, Marilyn Manson is the victim of woke culture, blah, 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 and all this stuff. Why is this important? It's not only important for the charismatic leader himself, of course, that's an evolutionary tactic that he's using, but this is important for the whole community and for the religious followers, because to them, this is something which is mirroring them, right? So he is a martyr for the faith. He is so discriminated. Oh, poor him, the whole world is against him, and he's the victim of this, not the abuser. This is the position that the followers of the cult of Marilyn Manson want to identify with. That's why he gets charismatic devotion through this tactic. So, whatever the 19th or 20th step of a charismatic leader, this is interesting. It's called the hidden prophet or the hidden leader. So what's that? Most religious leaders, when a controversy comes, instead of facing it like a brave person would do, right? They will go into hiding. And this hiding can take for several years. Right, for example, Bhagwan Rajneesh, he didn't speak for almost 4 years or something. Ron L. Hubbard from the Scientology sect, he went into hiding, into silence for a time. The leaders of the heavenly cult, the heavenly gate, they went into hiding, into this silence. It's pretty common in every cult. I can continue for minutes in this list, but I don't think you need to hear them, right? So this is a point where it's important for several reasons, right? First, evolutionary for the celebrity, for the charismatic leader itself. So in the case of Marilyn Manson, in the times of Columbine, or even now with the abuse allegations, he just goes into hiding. He doesn't speak. And he talks with the outside world, and that's always in the new religious movements. He talks with the outside world with or through the charismatic aristocracy. So that's the leaders of, right? That's what's happening with Marilyn Manson right now. He's sending his personal photos only through this social, through these groups, through those people, through his fans, so that they feel this special connection, and he's not even publishing it. And that's pretty convenient for many reasons. We will see that in some of the future videos. So the hidden master is important from this reason, but it also is important for the follower. It gives him a special type of feeling that his master had to flee, right? You can see it even in polygamist Warren Jeffs running away from police. There is always this feeling, oh no, the evil Babylon, the government, the police is after our prophet. So he's in hiding. and we have to support him, right? Now we're the cult, we have to support him. And that's all the people, what they are doing, right? One of the YouTube leaders of this is a woman named Colonel Kurtz. You can watch her videos. And these people, I believe, are even unknowingly part of this cult of Marilyn Manson, being driven inside of this spiral of charismatic devotion. So the next step is something that's called temple perversion. It can have many different points, but in some point, the new religious movements with their charismatic leader, they find a way how to create some holy place, some temple where they have an altar and stuff like this, and where they do something like a perversion of the traditional Christian or other traditional religious beliefs. So that's something we can see in Marilyn Manson's life, for example, in his apartment in LA, where he lived with Evan Rachel Wood. You can hear the testimonies of Evan Rachel Wood being whipped with a, which is almost apocalyptic, right? In the Jesus Christ style, being whipped with a whip which was from the Nazi Holocaust place, right? So Marilyn Manson, being a Nazi fan, he purchased this, and then he was whipping several women, according to the accounts, with this whip. And she had to kneel on this special altar, which you can see even on photos which Marilyn Manson has published, and they are, I presume, even part of the artwork of High and Low era. I remember as being a fan in those times, seeing this. So I've seen this altar many times. And there are things like a fake Eucharisty, the partaking of the flesh and blood of Jesus Christ. So in Manson's perversion, that's something he forced women to do with the blood pact, right? So they had to drink like vampires their blood, each other's blood. So that was basically their perversion of Eucharisty. And there are many other signs of the temple perversion. Maybe I can do a separate video on this, but I think this is enough. Terrorism. That's another step. Basically, most of new religious movements have used terrorism in their history. We can start with Mormonism using the terrorist organization of the Danites throughout the history to kill people, assassinate people, and so on. We can look at Muhammad, right? He was assassinating people in Medina when he became the dictator there. And again, Islam in the beginning was a new religious movement. But in the 20th century, we can see most of these new religious movements, right? Because there were so many of them. But we can see this in many places, right? Osho with the Rajneeshpuram place in America, the Bhagwan Rajesh movement with Sheila. They used terrorist attacks. They were spreading salmonella. They were trying to poison the waters. That was something the Mormons also tried to do in the 19th century. The terrorist attacks, for example, the Japanese Aum Shinrikyo, it was a Buddhist group. But finally, in the end, because of millennialistic movements, tendencies, and all this charismatic thing, they decided to use gas poison in the Tokyo metro. You can Google that, right? It's like 20 years ago. So that's something horrible. You can see the Waco incident. You can see so many terrorist incidents being connected to this. Even 9/11, you know. Traditionally, we consider Islamic terrorists to be like terrorist organizations because we look at it from a political or politological point of view. But if we look at it from a religious point of view, Bin Laden's movement, Al-Qaeda, was just a fundamentalist terrorist, but new religious movement, right? With a charismatic leader with all of these signs. That's something typical for this sects. And even the people Al-Qaeda has killed is similar to some of this horrible, or not horrible, but just other new religious cults. This is severely connected with militarization. That's another part. Taking arms and teaching people to take guns. Although many of those movements, new religious movements, almost all of them start with a pacifistic message against war, against violence, kind of. But they all go into this end when they decide, okay, we have to learn, use weapons, and doesn't matter if it's an Eastern religion or if it's a Western cult or if it's the group of Marilyn Manson. So militarization is one of the last signs, and the last is something called a hyperreal death. It's deeply connected to the first thesis and hypothesis I've presented in the first video about baudrillard arts philosophy, but it's very important to understand that the death cycle, the willingness of the charismatic leader to die, which the charismatic leader often shows to his devotees, that's what's getting the devotees to also sacrifice their life, right? And the celebrity, the charismatic leader, always prepares some spectacular kind of death. And the more it's a cult, the more the charismatic leader is using and thinking about the hyperreal spiral. That means that he's using the TV and the media and all those things to get his message out. Let me explain. For example, Jim Jones, right? So he recorded the mass suicide. He wanted it to be recorded so that people will remember it. Shockingly. The Heavenly Gate, right? They recorded everything. They wanted people to know. They wanted it to be an example of something. The Islamic terrorists, right? They are doing this. They want it to be televised, to be visible. Because terrorism, in its nature, it's affecting mostly democracies with mass media. Because if you do terrorism in a dictatorship or a authoritarian regime, it doesn't affect very much, right? Because you kill civilians, mostly, because if you would attack the army, it's not like entirely a terrorist attack, right? Let's consider terrorist attack to be an attack on civilians. So in that case, the dictator, he doesn't care for civilians, right? So he doesn't have to change anything. But in democracies, this suffering of those consumers, of those like regular people, is copied throughout the media in this hyperreal spiral onto all people, and everybody's afraid, right? And that makes the democratic regimes to somehow fight or debate with the terrorist organizations and terrorist regimes. That's just how it functions, right? The Islamic State, when it was functioning, it was a new religious movement cult, right? They were doing the beheadings and all those horrible torture on videos. That's part of it. And Marilyn Manson always used this idea, right? That's the thing in his famous song, Nobodies. That's the main idea behind his Lamb of God song, behind Death song, behind many songs in Hollywood era and in all of his eras, right? He's saying, specifically he's saying, if you die on the TV, you will be remembered and you will be a Lamb of God and blah, 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 blah. But if you die and nobody knows about it, like, what do you change? And that was his reaction to Columbine, like being an apology. But basically, that was encouraging other people, other young people to do this. Marilyn Manson was pretending to, and that's something charismatic leaders mostly do, they are pretending the world has driven those people to murder or suicide. right? All the cults, they say, oh, they forced us, right? Vaco. Oh, they forced us. We had to kill ourselves, right? Or to die. There was no other chance. The world was pushing us. That's always the excuse they are basically saying. And that's something we can always see in this cults, right? Marilyn Manson is pretending that this is something about the mass media, about American culture, that American culture is obsessed with killing, but he himself is the one. He is a typical charismatic pop culture metal singer, obsessed with killing, murder, and thinking and talking about it. So he's not... He maybe started as someone exposing this, but that's not how he ended. So this hyperreal death, this encouragement of killing and being it on the TV, affecting democracy with terroristic domestic attacks and scaring people, scaring mass media, scaring journalists, threatening journalists, right? We know this from Manson's story. That's one of the main steps that leads to the hyperreal cult and its establishment. So I hope you liked this video. Let me know in the comments if you have listened it until this far. What do you think about this? I have not yet gotten any big reaction on this, which astonishes me. But I will continue in this series because there is a lot to talk about. Religious studies, new religious studies especially, show us in many details how Marilyn Manson's cult is functioning, what he's doing, what he's using to make it function, to make his charisma always be powerful, right? And that's a paradox which I want to use as a final thought, which is kind of a scary thought, sorry. It's an example from a new religious movement called Jehovah's Witnesses, maybe you know it. And I think it's in the 60s, maybe in the 70s, but I think it's in the 60s. In one of the African countries, Jehovah's Witnesses were massacred, right? The government tried to force them to, I don't know, recognize some governor or some dictator, and they didn't do it. So they killed and tortured them all. And maybe in such a thing, you could think, well, if I'm a member of a cult and they are killing us and there is no divine retribution, right? There is no help coming. Although the guru, the charismatic leader said, God will protect us, nothing came, blah, blah, blah. Like, how does a person in a cult still stay there? And we think about it as the deaths of those people, of those co-believers, to be something like a burden or a problem, but in the opposite. New religious studies show us that, in this case, for example, of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the other Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, in America, they felt victimized. They felt like they have to be even more fundamentalist, and they started believing in an apocalypse and a coming apocalypse in 1975. That was their last apocalypse so far. So that's something that maybe could also always astonish you. How is it possible that the violence, the problems, all the problems don't make the people go away from the cult? And it doesn't matter if they're abusers, victims, or something in between, which is mostly the case. It's this fact that the sacrifices of other people, they are only strengthening the group, right? So if there is a cult leader like Marilyn Manson or any other cult leader in the world who wants his devotees to be more devoted, and he has, I don't know, for example, 100 devotees, one of the best tactics is to let I don't know, for example, 20 to be slaughtered. And that makes those other 80 to be even more believing, right? It's a crazy thought. And only crazy people, psychopaths like cult leaders, are using these tactics. Again, you can see it on terrorist attacks, right? The whole thinking behind the suicide attacks, which is a thing, right? It's a different thing. One thing is a terrorist attack, right? And another thing is a suicide terrorist attack. When you willingly know you're gonna die, you don't have to die, but you want to die. That's something scary that even more strengthens the power of this, you know? You'd think, again, well, if I'm a member of this, I don't know, Hamas or any other cult organization in the world, and they send my brother to be killed in a terrorist attack, like, I should be mad at them, right? Why would I do the same? And that's the thing. It's not pushing the people away from this cult, the fact that there was the sacrifice. It's even drawing them more inside. So such a person would even more go on such a crusade and die in the same manner, right? Which is something very sad. But the reason behind all of this, behind this gravity that's powering this move, this shift, is always the charismatic leader. Let's not forget this. My professors who teach me, they believe very strongly that the guilt for the charismatic relationship is always somewhere in between of the cult leader and the followers. But honestly, at least in this case of Marilyn Manson, I can't accept that fully. Because I think Marilyn Manson was such a smart figure who knew how to use all these charismatic things, not only in theory, but in praxis, right? He studied all of these things. So no wonder he was a specialist in it. And these girls were simply not educated to resist such a cult tactic, right? Who would even think that a relationship can be a beginning of a cult, right? That's not something we emphasize in modern times. So let me know what you think about this video if you watch it until this. Let's hope all abuses will come to light, and let me know and share this video if you liked it.